Welcome. I'm Alfredo Behrens. I have been studying on these issues of cross-cultural management now for quite a few years. I've published, I've given lectures, I've coached companies, and today what I want to show you is just a little distillation of that thinking. It will be a short seminar, and I hope you enjoy it. In the first place, I should warn you that I'm not speaking about all Brazilians, but about most of them. Those who do not have a very long span of formal education, those who barely speak English, and that is the vast majority of Brazilians. Therefore, what I have to say does not really apply to the Brazilians you may have met in international settings, or working in finance, for example. But for the vast majority of Brazilians, those that you wish to sell to and those that you will have to employ or that your clients will employ, those are the ones that I'm referring to this seminar. And those are the ones that you will need to work with if you want to work with Brazilians. I do have a takeaway for this course. Yes, it's important that you figure it out. Brazilians are hierarchical, they are strong in conflict avoidance and in group orientation, of course, and they're very slow to trust outsiders, slow to compete because they are oriented towards collaboration, but they will compete strongly against out members, that is, members of other groups, other corporations, if you wish. So what you need to understand is that in this short webinar, you will be learning how to manage the Brazilians and other South Americans, Africans, Asians, and Mediterraneans, about 4/5 of humanity. And why is culture important? Why will I discuss the culture of Brazilians? Because culture trumps management every single time, unless you tune your management to the local culture. If this is so, if you have worked with Puerto Ricans or Dominicans or Panamanians or even Venezuelans, why should you worry about learning to work with Brazilians? Well, because Brazilians are different. But why should they be different if, after all, they're Latins, they live in Latin America? This, I believe, is because Brazil is made up of an immigration current that came mostly from the Iberian Peninsula, also from the Mediterranean, and largely as well from Africa. But let's stick to the Iberian Peninsula. Why would these Portuguese-speaking people be different from the Spanish-speaking ones? Well, I believe it is because though both countries left the same region, the Iberian Peninsula, at the same time, after the same shared history, say the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula, and with the same background, both were staunchly Catholics, why would they be different? Because the Spanish took the western route to the Indies, and they bumped into the New World and could not plug themselves into an international trade route. This means that they remained aristocratic and therefore belligerent. The Spanish people and their heirs in Latin America tend to seek winner-takes-all solutions, as it befitted the aristocrats. On the other hand, the Brazilians inherited the culture from the Portuguese, who actually found the way to the Indies, like circumventing Africa and arriving at Calicut. But it also means that in doing so, they turned into merchants because they plugged themselves into the international trade route that was coming all the way from China through India to Eastern Europe. And traders, they seek win-win solutions. This is why Brazilians at large tend to be negotiators, and they avoid conflict. Because Brazilians, in being the heirs of traders, they seek win-win solutions, and if they avoid conflict, that will be reflected in their literature, even in their pop art or graffiti like it does here. This is a wall in São Paulo where somebody wrote, "Hero is the guy who did not have a chance to run away." Well, if heroism is to be reduced to mobility, to the ability to run away, definitely being a hero does not carry much weight in Brazil, because Brazilians avoid conflict. crucial for you to understand how to give feedback. Now, of course, it's not only graffitis that portray a country. Their literature, their cinema also does. But let us here just focus on the national anthems of quite a few countries that I have selected. National anthems, as you know, are sung by children since they are about 11 to 12 years old. And they sort of train the minds of the people that attend school, which are legitimate ways of solving conflicts. If the anthems are very aggressive, naturally, the children will grow up believing that aggression is one direct way of solving conflicts and perhaps the preferable one, because the national anthems do not really admit any other alternative, except for the Brazilian one. The national anthem of Brazil is a song to nature and beauty, rivers, the forests. Everything is beautiful there, very few aggressive words. So much so that the share of aggressive words in the structure of the Brazilian anthem is only about 5%. But as you move south through Uruguay to Argentina, the level of aggressiveness of the national anthems increases substantially, up to 7 to 8 times. The level of aggression of the anthems of Argentina, Chile, and Mexico are relatively similar, but 7 to 8 times the level of aggressiveness of the Brazilian. Now, would this different level of aggressiveness express itself in any way? Well, substantially. Think, for example, during the Cold War, all these countries except Mexico had a dictatorship period. There were dirty wars going on. People were killed or disappeared. Now, as a share of the population, the people that were killed or disappeared in Argentina was almost 70 times larger than in Brazil. Now, this is quite telling. But if it's not only that, let us see what happens in business. Argentina, only in the last 2 to 3 decades, has gone to war with many of its neighbors. For example, Great Britain, or Chile, in a conflict that was mediated by the Vatican, or it blocked an international bridge connecting to Uruguay because the Argentinians were unsatisfied with the Uruguayans building paper mills there. So much so that the Argentinians twisted the arm of ENCE, a Spanish company that was considering investing in a paper mill in Uruguay. And at the workplace, the Argentinians have one of the highest levels of assaults and sexual harassment at the workplace, according to the International Labour Organization. There are many ways in which the latent aggressiveness expressed in the national anthem of Argentina is reflected in the way that the Argentinians behave. So, to a great extent, the level of aggressiveness of the national anthems says quite something about the countries themselves. And when it comes to trust, well, let's focus on Brazil here. Very nice people, very smiling, but they trust very few others. Essentially, Brazilians trust their family members. Outside the family, colleagues at work, friends come next. But really, only 30% of Brazilians trust those. When it comes to neighbors, then it starts falling heavily. And when it comes to trusting most people, then the Brazilians are not very trusting at all. Now, we have to understand that Brazilians are bound to family. And in being bound to family, they prefer very close networks. Let's just look at the characteristics of the people that were observed in order to develop the mainstream management, like, for example, it was developed in the US. Americans are, yes, very trusting. They are also very competitive. They're very egalitarian. They are quintessentially Emersonian in the sense that they are perseverant and resilient. Well, these are the characteristics that the humorist Chuck Jones, working for Warner Cartoon, produced the Coyote and the Roadrunner cartoon called Bip Bip, remember? Well, the Coyote is very, very perseverant. It's also very resilient. He's not a loser because he doesn't give up. He perseveres. Now, the Brazilians, again, are completely different. The Brazilians are restrictively trusting, as I told you, rather than achievers and goal-oriented. They're hedonists. And though they persevere more in a sprint-like type of thing, not very long run. And unlike the Americans, they're not competitive but collaborative, and they're very group-oriented and hierarchical. Now, what does it mean that these nations, America and Brazil, are so different when it comes to the coyote and the roadrunner? Well, as you know, the audience of Americans, particularly waspish Americans, side with the coyote, the quintessentially Emersonian character. On the other hand, the Brazilians side with the roadrunner. Moreover, the Brazilians, as well as the Indians, tell you that they would not like to be run by a coyote type. And that's where the problem starts. Because most multinationals were originated in the waspish area of the US. They are Anglo-Saxons or Northern Europeans who tend to side with the coyote. Once those corporations mature, they expand internationally and they appoint people to run the subsidiaries, which are people who resemble themselves, therefore coyote types, who are to lead roadrunners, who tell you they do not like being bossed around by coyotes. How does this spell out in terms of organizational structures? Because it's not only graffitis, it's not only cartoons that we're talking about. So let's see how this reflects in organizational structures. Now, assume that you have two types of organizations, those that are predominantly focused on relational aspects and those that are focused on organizational structure, like this one. They both can be weak and strong in relational focus or weak and strong in organizational structure. The organizations that are weak in relational focus and strong in structure are called the rational bureaucratic organizations. These are all the modern organizations, as, for example, most multinationals. Organizations that are strong in relational focus but weak in structure are the traditional organizations. These are the ones that predominate in emerging markets. Now, it turns out that if you're brought in a managerial environment of the Northern Hemisphere, particularly an Anglo-Saxon one or Northern European, you will tend to believe that mainstream management is the most effective. And this has been, for example, argued by this article in Harvard Business Review. Because, of course, you know, if these companies have succeeded, then they should be the ones that know how to do things. But it also means that when the research was done, they neglected looking into traditional organizations because they did not think they were deemed to be good for analysis. And this is where they went wrong, because traditional organizations make up the best of the emerging markets. But if you believe that the other way of running them, the mainstream management, is one, then you will try to transform organizations into rational bureaucratic ones. This implies in introducing rules and procedures, and it might not be the way that the people in emerging markets want their business to be run. Take, for example, a samba school in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, or many other cities in Brazil. They are traditional organizations. Carnival in Brazil is a major event. It involves perhaps 1 million people actively in them during over 4 days. And the Carnival parade is a parade of samba schools that compete to win. Samba schools are originated in communities, amongst people that know themselves. When they become very large, the people that come later are invited by members of the community. So it's a very tightly organized type of structure.
A carnival parade in Brazil is a fantastic world-class show involving over 3,000 dancers, They parade singing and dancing to a well-rehearsed choreography. Floats must be built and costumes stitched together. Yet each parader performs during only 15 minutes at the carnival parade. That Brazilians devote so much effort during a whole year for only 15 minutes of glory parading should trigger a manager's curiosity, because both samba schools and businesses are goal-oriented organizations constrained by resources. One works much better than the other.
Well, obviously, a samba school works very well. It's extremely effective, and teamwork requires trust, and trust takes time to build in Brazil as well as in India. So you see, building and around a community network is crucial for effectiveness amongst people that don't trust each other very much. Let's just have a look at what happens in India. This is the map of, say, half to southern India. And what is interesting is the region of Mumbai there, because in Mumbai there is a group of people called Dabbawalas, 4,000 of them, half of them illiterate, who distribute 200,000 lunch boxes every day. The food is cooked at the home and delivered at where the person works, then picked up again and sent back home. It's not one person that does it, it's a team. And the team means that this lunchbox may exchange hands perhaps 6 times during a journey. So we're talking here of about 2.4 million transactions a day. And there are no mistakes. Forbes magazine has awarded them the Six Sigma Award. So how does this happen? Well, because most of the people that work amongst the Dabbawalas were hired in the district of Pune. Again, a community, perhaps family networks. And these people take great pride in being part of an organization that makes no mistakes. They might earn little, they might not carry much respect, but within their community, they are kings. Let us now look at southern India, in the Kerala district. This is a region of India with many rivers and lakes, and transportation by boat is important. So if you know how to row, then you're really prized. Because rowing is so important, there is a competition once a year, the Trophy Nero race boat competition, and the villages support their own boats. And it's massive. Each one of those boats may represent a village, and the people that row there are given time off. They're fed by the village because the village takes pride in their boat winning the race. So you see, it's the village again, the network, the family network, extended family, people that know each other, that is crucial for the success of them working as teams. So, if people, when they're in emerging markets, they tend to be very family-oriented and very network-oriented, and they distrust outsiders, then you must understand that people that work in a corporation, when they don't know each other, they might take a long time to trust each other effectively to work in a team. Therefore, it might make more sense to hire people along networks of people that already know themselves, like, for example, by internal referrals in a corporation. Of course, not everybody can be hired that way. You may need specific skills, but perhaps for a large share of your corporation, most of the people can be hired along lines which either involve a community or a strong network by affinities, rather than by mainstream techniques which imply mixing together people that have been selected on the basis of their curriculum vitae and strong skills, but may not be part of the team that is already working in the company, and therefore they will be outsiders and distrusted. So what to do? Well, it's only in a nutshell that I'm going to share with you some points that may be very interesting for you. First place, culture is there, and it won't change. Not in the time that you have to worry. So rather than attempting to shift people into a managerial stance that is unfamiliar to them, what you should do is learn to surf in the culture which is very group-oriented in emerging markets. Now, this means that you would seek to blend these traditional ways of doing things into your framework of goals and incentives. rather than the other way. So profit may be an objective, but it's not a purpose. This corporation must have a sense of purpose, and that is what the corporation stands for. Therefore, you should be able to allow for a mystical dimension of life. Religiosity is high on the agenda of the people in emerging markets, at least in most of them. And therefore, you will see that in their workplace, there are lots of saints or goddesses or gods that the people tend to emulate or feel protected by. Yet when you go to a modern multinational, what you will see is a hyper-realistic, hyper-rational type of environment where religiosity has been cast away. Now, if people are bound to groups, then leadership must be a leadership that they trust. There's no place for appointing leaders that were not trusted by their followers. Now, in order for a leader to be respected, he must be seen as not only effective and strong, but also caring. It's the paternalist type of leadership, which is frowned upon in mainstream management, but is very accepted in many emerging markets, particularly in Brazil. This means that when you're managing teams in a corporation in Brazil, for example, you should tend to promote the people that are seen as natural leaders by the teams that they work with, and not those that vie to stand out. Because those that stand out are the ones that are frowned upon by the team because they tend to dilute it. And the caring leadership by the people that the teams recognize as their own leaders leads to a much more effective teamwork. And if the community is so important, then you should make sure that you respect the values. And the values mean that, families do not fire. Therefore, people are allowed to grow old in traditional organizations. And the elders are respected because their presence there not only shares wisdom and a long history at the corporation, but also it means that for the youngers, there is a position in that company that they can always trust to fulfill because the elders are there and they are respected. When they are not, then why should a young person devote the best of its effort to an organization where he or she has no future? So offering job security to the people in the corporation might be more effective than offering them financial bonuses, for example. Because if you offer them job security, they will know they will be with you for the long run. Alignment, of course, follows trust and fairness. It doesn't work the other way. First, trust, fairness, and then alignment to the objectives. And it also provides for a very favorable feedback environment. Say, for example, a samba school. They meet only 30 to 40 times a year during weekends, after work. There's not much time to correct. Therefore, feedback is given on the spot. It's very direct. It can be very impatiently given to. But it is accepted because people know that they're all working together for a common objective, winning the carnival parade. They are aligned. So they take it. Though feedback giving in a multinational corporation in Brazil usually is a minefield. Do Brazilians compete? Yes, they do. But they don't compete within a team. They compete with outsiders. Therefore, the distrust of outsiders can be blended into your competitive advantage if you can manage to identify the other corporations as the ones that they have to compete with. It happens in football all the time. It happens in samba schools all the time. So why not take advantage of that? Build a cohesive team and drive that team to compete against others. But don't destroy the teams by making them compete within themselves. Well, much of what I said is expanded in this online course that I have developed. It's a course in 14 chapters, 7 minutes each. There is considerable reading if you wish, but that's optional. And just attending the online course can be very helpful for you to learn how to manage Brazilians and perhaps even other people in emerging markets. Much of what I've told you is also available in some of these books that I have written. The first one was written in 2008. It's in Portuguese. Then in an abridged but upgraded version, it was published by Stanford University Press in 2009. Later, I wrote this book, Shooting Heroes and Rewarding Cowards. Susie Welsh, which was a former editor of the Harvard Business Review, called it very fascinating and innovative. You should give it a try. It's available in English in Amazon under the title of Shooting Heroes and Rewarding Cowards. Well, the webinar has come to an end. I hope that we will keep in touch. You may find more in-depth information in my site, alfredoberens.com. You may write to me, you may call me if you wish. I'm here to help. Thank you very much.